Thank you and welcome. I'm Father Mitch Pacwa, and welcome to EWTN Live. Tonight, we're going to be talking with a canon lawyer, discussing how Catholics can use the law of the Church, canon law, to defend their God-given rights within the Church. But before we get to that, we want to welcome to the set EWTN's Director of Program Acquisitions and Co-Productions, Mr. John Elson, and he will talk about some new programs that they acquired and you can expect to see on EWTN. John, you doing all right?
Doing great, Father. Thank you so much. Good evening. How are you?
What kind of new programs do you have for us?
We were really excited to inform our family viewing from home that we have two new movies, actually original movies that we ourselves produced thanks to the generous prayerful support of our viewers at home. On this upcoming Saturday, February 2nd, we'll be broadcasting a movie about Saint Rose of Lima, the great 16th century saint who was famous for her piety, her penance, her fasting, and her great love of neighbor. She would dedicate whole parts of her family home to caring for indigenous individuals, those of African descent, and other people who could not be treated in the official hospitals run at that time by the governing authorities. And then 2 weeks from that time, on February 16th at 8 p.m. Eastern, we will be premiering another original movie about one of her contemporaries, Saint Martin de Porres.
Well, he's not just a contemporary, he's the neighbor. He lives just down,
there you go,
down the street
right
from
down
her.
the street, exactly.
Because I've been to both places.
Yeah, and he lived, as you know, a very difficult life. He was abandoned by his father, took the trade as a barber as a very young man, volunteered at the local Dominican convent for many years, and had to endure a lot of racial, hatred and
because his mother was African.
Was a free African. His father was a Spanish nobleman, so he was a mixed race individual. And at that time, those were people that were not looked very fondly upon. But he took that with great grace, and the movie, as written, we presented it through the perspective of a Juan Vasquez de Parra, who was himself an orphan, born in Spain. Was unfortunately his mother and father died in the New World, and he was taken in by St. Martin into the Dominican convent. And he is the witness of a lot of the miraculous cures that Martin practiced. And in the clip that we're going to show you, we're showing you a true story where two men were falsely accused and were being pursued by the authorities. They sought Martin's help in the convent, and this is a clip we'd like to show you from the movie.
Let's take a look at it.
They've entered the convent! Look for them! Brother, have you seen two fugitives around here? Brother?
He's praying. Don't interrupt him.
Let's keep looking.
Okay. All right, so this, I've seen Saint Martin de Porres is truly a very lovable person. It's an amazing man. So both of them, and that'll be on the 16th.
16th of February, yeah.
So great.
Yeah,
thank you for
you.
keeping up with doing these productions.
Thank you.
And we will be back in just a couple of minutes with tonight's guest, Philip Gray, a canon lawyer. So please stay with us. Welcome back. Thank you. And as all of you know, there has been a lot of upheaval in the church lately. You've got the abuse crisis front and center. You've got problems with what's going on in seminaries. Also, there are demographic changes and a lot of other reasons that are causing parishes and schools to close. Sometimes they're subsumed into other parishes. And I think there still are some occasions of liturgical abuse. I think it's down from the 70s and 80s, but still occurs now and again, sometimes unwittingly, sometimes not. But there are even some occasions of people being denied the sacraments when there is no cause to do so. So a lot of Catholics are unaware, but they do have legal rights and they have legal recourse to address their grievances within the framework of the church. That's where canon law comes in. So to tell us more about it is our guest, who is a canon lawyer and the president of two great organizations that really work hard to defend the faith. One is called the St. Joseph Foundation. The other is Catholics United for the Faith. So please welcome Mr. Philip Gray.
Thank you, Father.
Philip.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here.
Well, I just want to make sure that the audience understands you're a gentleman who knows how to dress. You're from Texas, right?
Yes, I am.
Yes, you are. And you don't live there now, but brought a little bit of Texas with you.
We call it North Texas, where I live.
Yeah, see, folks, if you don't understand this, Texans think that it was a privilege that they bestowed on the other states to join them. So
That's right.
So now here's something we want to deal with, though. You are supporting a family by being a canon lawyer. How many other people get to do that?
If they don't work in a diocese,
Yeah.
then almost no one.
Yeah.
I'm privileged now.
Heard of it before.
I'm privileged now to work for the St. Joseph Foundation, but before that, I had a private practice. I was the only canon lawyer that I know of who raised a family on a full-time practice in canon law in North America. Mm-hmm.
Like people do in civil law. You
Yes.
were a canon lawyer.
Yes. Now there is another canon lawyer who started a private practice full-time before me, but he had already raised his family. Mm-hmm. And I understand he had some assistance with his wife who worked. My wife took care of the kids, and we raised the family on my income.
Yeah. Well, this is something that brings out the need then for canon lawyers.
Yes.
First of all, when we talk about canon law, what is it in this summary?
Sure. It's the law system of the Catholic Church, but canon law is described by Pope St. John Paul the Great. It is the way in which the church organizes herself temporally. Mm-hmm. So it encompasses every area of life for the church. Mm-hmm. It's not just a way for us to vindicate rights, it's also a way that helps us understand how the sacraments exist, mm-hmm. how they're to be administered.
And lived out.
And lived out,
Yeah.
exactly. Mm-hmm. So there's a complete system, just as there is in civil law, mm-hmm. that regulates how the Catholic Church operates in the world.
And by the standards of law codes, because law codes, have better and worse qualities. Some law codes are horrendous and oppressive. Soviet Union or communist China. But other law codes are very sensible. And canon law has a good reputation for being a solid set of laws for what it does.
Well, it's founded on the natural law and the divine positive law. So, of course, it's going to have a foundation of truth. And without it, it has no real meaning, and it
Right.
loses its spirit.
Right.
So.
Now, what are some of the situations in which you get called in to be a canon lawyer, to advocate for people?
Generally, right now, When I just scroll through our case list, we have had a recent case with people who were refused the sacraments, who were denied even access to a church because they had a disagreement with their pastor.
And does the pastor have a right to say, look, you are criticizing me for the way I celebrate Mass, you may not come here anymore? Does he have that right?
No, he does not. He doesn't have that power. Now, and that's not exactly how that case went. Gratefully, it was resolved without a whole lot of necessary appeals. We were very grateful to see how the diocese responded to the men's situation. But we've also had situations with church closure cases, parish merger cases. They're probably the largest number of cases we have right now, affecting thousands of people that we're working with.
How do you get involved in a church closure case?
If a group of people from a parish call us and say, we just had read from the pulpit that the bishop is going to close our church, relegate it to secular use, and close our church and sell it, and is there anything we can do? And oftentimes, we find out about it not necessarily too late, but in the 11th hour, because they don't know where to go. They don't know that they have rights. They don't know that there's an actual process a bishop has to follow to close a church. But it allows us, when they call us, to go through a process of evaluating the situation, getting information, and determining if they have grounds for some kind of action in canon law.
Yeah, there are a lot of dioceses that are closing churches, partly because they don't have enough vocations, partly because populations have moved. You know, a lot of times what had been an ethnic Catholic neighborhood of some kind or other, German, Polish, whatever it might be, they've moved into the suburbs. And so sometimes folks, don't see a need for it. But there is a process that the bishop has to follow when he does.
There is. And just as a point of reference, the jurisprudence from the Vatican makes clear a bishop cannot close a church on the basis of not having enough priests to staff that church. Nor can he close it just because demographics have shifted. There has to be a grave situation to show that the church can no longer be sustained, either structurally or financially, and that he may be able to diminish its use to a certain degree, but he can't actually close the church itself for those two reasons that you mentioned.
Okay, see, and this is something that's very important because a lot of people hear about these things, and the people of God gave their lives. My great-grandparents helped build St. Florian's Church. We had the pastor on the show a few months ago. And it's not just a building. Now, there are some cases when, they seem to be modeled after supermarkets. They're not very pretty. And I wouldn't mind seeing some of them closed because they're just ugly. The architecture was poor quality and so on. But even if I don't like the architecture, that's not grounds for closing it.
Right. The statistic is, and I did my own studies through my years in private practice with the cases I had, and the Pew Research Center also did a study, and our figures matched up. 20 to 50% of Catholics who attend Mass regularly will stop attending Mass if their church closes.
Interesting.
And that the statistic grows depending on how they're treated during the process of closure. So this is not just about closing a building. It's not about structures and even architecture. It's about saving souls. And when I get a case like this, I'm deeply concerned of whether or not the pastoral care of those people is being considered.
Sometimes it may not be the case, but because these decisions are done in chanceries without consultation it seems like such a corporate kind of decision with finances in mind and practicalities that miss the sensitivities of these being places where like I say, Florence, my great-grandparents were baptized there. And, my great-great-grandparents, were there to worship.
Absolutely.
And down through to the present generation. I still do funerals for relatives up there.
Absolutely. And we've watched how the process has shifted, how different dioceses and bishops approach these situations over the last probably 30 to 40 years. And during the course of the last 30 years, the Foundation's existence and my work over about 24 years as a canon lawyer, we have seen a shift at how bishops are approaching these decisions. And what some are doing now they are hiring secular firms to do these feasibility studies. And when I look at some of these studies, I have to wonder how much spiritual need was being assessed here. How are the pastoral care of the faithful being looked at when the bottom line is merely demographics and money? Then it raises a difficult question in my mind about reconciling that with the obligation of pastoral care of the faithful.
Exactly.
That's my big concern, which is really what the purpose of canon law is. It's a tool for the salvation of souls. And for it to be a tool for the salvation of souls, it has to be infused with the spirit of the church herself, which is that natural law, that divine positive law. And when those underpinnings of sacred scripture and of tradition are removed and it becomes a more positivistic system, then we lose this spirit and this flavor that allows canon law to be effective.
And there are times when, I've in priest retreats that I've given in recent years, I've been emphasizing to the other priests that we have to remember the church is not our employer. This is not some corporation.
That's right.
But we priests are to act in the person of Christ.
Yes.
And if Christ is the bridegroom of the church, we have to love the church like a groom loves his bride.
Yes.
We have to have a romance and not a corporate business model.
Yes. And taking that a step further, when we look at 1 Peter 3:8, he says, "You husbands, if you do not love and respect your wives, God will not hear your prayers."
That's bad.
That's bad.
Yeah, that's bad.
That's bad. In canon law, it opens the whole section on the rights of the faithful with a presentation on baptism. Who are the Christian faithful? And of course, those incorporated into Christ through baptism constitute the Christian faithful, in so much as they are incorporated by baptism is the wording used. It goes on to say that among Christ's faithful, there are those who are ordained and are clerics, and those who are not, and they're the laity. And then it goes on to say, and they share an equal dignity within the church. An equal dignity and respect. And that's mirrors, or not, doesn't mirror, it reflects what Christ said about the faithful themselves, how St. Paul described husband and wife.
Exactly, in Ephesians chapter
Ephesians
5.
That's right.
Now, I'm ready to get you onto a hot plate here.
Okay.
Because there are issues that people are very concerned with. We've seen what almost, I mean, you're tempted to say the glee with which the new abortion law was enacted in New York State, so that you can have an abortion up, until the child is already out, and they made it another law contrary to the Roe versus Wade. They've gone beyond Roe v. Wade by saying that if the child survives the abortion, then the child can be killed. Now, Roe v. Wade says that if it's outside the womb, it's a human person. But they're taking it beyond Roe v. Wade. And people are then saying, wait a minute, that governor is a Catholic. Why isn't he excommunicated? If in that kind of situation, what does canon law do to allow this? And by the way, this is going to be now a similar law has been proposed in Virginia.
Yes,
That just yesterday, I think it was. So this is.
and
this
Rhode
looks like
Island is looking at that.
Rhode Island, which is, a very Catholic state. What does canon law say about politicians who support or vote for that? Should they be, excommunicated? What does the law allow or not allow?
Well, that's a number of questions. Well, let's start
Yes.
with what does the law allow and not allow, because that's probably the easiest to tackle right now. The law does allow for a bishop to excommunicate a politician who, like the governor of New York, who claims to be a Catholic and on one day is touting his Catholic heritage and the next day is signing such a law into effect, that he can be remonstrated by the bishop, he can be warned, and if he persists, he can be excommunicated. Penalties can be levied against him, and there's different ways that a bishop can do that. But just as in civil law, criminal acts are tried by the state or the federal government, and the victim of such a crime, they may have some say or influence into whether the crime will be, the criminal will be indicted, but it's up to the state to do it. It's the same in canon law. It's up to the bishop or his promoter of justice to pursue an action against anyone for a penalty. So it all begins with whether or not the bishop is willing to take that kind of action. But I don't think that excommunication is the only method or the only penalty that could be levied. I know
That was my next question. So the bishop he would have to give a private and personal warning.
Oh, he can be a public warning.
A public warning
It can
too,
be a
okay.
public warning.
All right, so he can but he has to give a warning.
Yes.
And if the person remains unrepentant, that's grounds for excommunication.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But then, so that's one tactic. What are some of the other remedies? Because we don't want anyone to understand that the evil of killing children. I mean, one of the politician who proposed this law in Virginia said, if the mother is having contractions, can you still abort the baby? And she said,
Yes.
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 In her law, yes. So this is how far they want to go. What are some of the other remedies to warn the faithful against such inherent evil?
Well, let's go back to 1 Corinthians for a minute. 1 Corinthians 5, St. Paul really got on to the Corinthians because they did not throw out of the community a man who was living with his father's wife.
Right. So it was his stepmother, presumably,
Yes.
and he was living with her as his wife.
And St. Paul said, not even the pagans act in such a way. I believe he used those words. And he said, and you are tolerating this in your community. You need to throw him out. And it even said at the very end, it says, not even eating with him. Now, let's fast forward now. Excommunication doesn't remove someone from the community of the church entirely. Now, there used to be anathema.
Right.
That's not really in the code anymore. I believe that the Vatican can impose it, but a bishop doesn't have that in his arsenal of ability. However,
and for an understanding of that, if you take a look at it was a movie about St. Thomas à Becket.
yes,
That was based on the play Murder in the Cathedral. And in there you see the laying out of the anathema, very, very strong liturgical action to excommunicate the king.
yes. But within the penalty laws of the church, there are two kinds of penalties. you have censures, which are intended to be medicinal. They're supposed to somehow encourage the offender to retract and become faithful to the church again. But you also have what's called expiatory penalties. And they're intended just to make sure that the harm is corrected. They are to also make a demonstration, if you would, to prescribe against scandal. You know, our Lord talks about in Matthew 17 and 18 that the whole reason we're supposed to go to our brother and try to talk things out and take matters to the church and then turn them over to the world is to avoid scandal, so the little ones are not scandalized by these evil acts within the church.
He says in that passage, scandal is inevitable, but woe to the one who brings it.
Amen.
There's something about a millstone.
Yeah, about a millstone.
Yeah.
I have one of those in my basement,
Yes.
the basement of my office.
Yes.
If I need it, it's handy. But these expiatory penalties, one of them is privation. And it's totally within the bounds of the archbishop to issue a privation penalty if he's finding him guilty, and because it's not a censure, it doesn't require the same kind of warning. And he can issue a privation penalty and say he is not allowed on church property. He can, because privation allows you to restrict a right that a faithful may have in gravity to the violation made. I would consider this crime against the unborn to be far greater than this man in Corinth living with his stepmother.
Yeah, yeah.
And if
That
St.
could be
Paul
corrected,
says,
whereas when an infant is dead, you can't undo it.
Amen. And so if it's good enough for St. Paul to say don't even eat with this man, then why are we even letting him call himself a Catholic and come onto church property if he wants to? That's what I would recommend. You don't have to play the censure card. You can play an expiatory penalty card. Now the faithful...
See, most of us don't know that that is an option. You know, you don't have to go to the degree of formal excommunication. There are these other penalties, and then you still have an ace in the hole, so to speak.
Yes, yes. And my biggest concern in all this is if nothing is done, what is the message being sent to the faithful?
And to the world.
And to the world, that's right.
Because there are
to other politicians.
I just heard on secular radio that why aren't the Catholics doing something about this? The non-Catholic was speaking that he's scandalized that there's not, because it's not just the evil of the law, that's bad enough, but the celebratory, the lighting buildings in pink and things like this, that this celebration is exactly the kind of thing that Isaiah warned about when he said they have made a covenant with death. And they forget that death is God's enemy, not his friend. They've befriended death. And we have to be people of the resurrection who say, no, you may not make death your policy.
Yes. And the faithful need to understand that they have power, that their baptism and their status in the church gives them influence and authority. They may not be able to issue interdicts or expiatory penalties or call people to trial, but they have other influence that they can exert. And when the faithful stand up and realize they can organize themselves and they can take some of these issues head on, I think we may see some changes in how the administration in the church is dealing with these issues.
See, that's one of the other things too, that a lot of times you have some people willing to say to a bishop, you be the point man. And then they don't walk behind them. Point man in battle is walking ahead of everybody. He's the first one to spot the enemy and take on in a firefight. But he's got to have backup.
Yes.
And a lot of times you don't see people willing to give back up. And that's part of the other thing too.
Yes.
Let your bishop know. If he makes a courageous statement,
You're with him.
exactly.
Yes.
Let him know.
Yes.
Because the enemies of the church are going to make it. We saw Senator Hirono and Senator Harris and Senator Feinstein going after judge candidates because they're Catholic and presumably pro-life. So we have to be, and who's standing up for them? We have to back up these folks and back up the bishops.
Amen.
We can't be sort of passive. This isn't a boxing match where you're passively watching. You have to be involved in this.
What we tell our clients is that regardless of what the process is that unfolds in their case, they have to always be open and really pursuing some kind of collaboration and dialogue that's authentic dialogue with their bishop or with the pastor, whoever that there's a contention with.
To rectify.
Amen. Because it's far better if you can come to an agreement and deal with the issue than if you have to go through a canonical process of appeal.
Yeah.
Far better. And I can say that in almost every case where a bishop responded to us or to our clients in a favorable manner and said, let's come sit down and talk this out, we were able to work it out mutually in agreeable fashion with just a handful of cases as an exception. I've had cases with church closures, school closures, priest removal cases, removal of liturgical rites, and I could go on and on and on. But when the bishop sits down and says, let's talk it,
Then
we
that
can work
works,
it out.
and that's what you want.
And that's what we want.
We have to take a break. We have to stop talking, take a break, and we want to open up for your questions and your comments on any of these issues of canon law. So please stay with us and call in. Welcome back. Are you ready to take on some questions?
Sure.
All right, let's start off with Sandy. Sandy, you there?
Yes, I am, Father.
Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from the Erie Diocese near Oil
Great.
City.
Yep.
And
I'll bet you have some
parish-
snow up there, huh?
It's very cold.
Yeah.
0. I'm sitting here with a blanket. But my question is it according to canon law you cannot have the Blessed Sacrament in a church where there's not a lot of masses? The Blessed Sacrament was removed last week from our little tiny church. And those of us who have keys, because of the things that are going on up here and worldwide, we like to go in and pray. And no, we're not hurting anybody. We're going in and praying, and about 14 to 16 of us once a week get together and pray. So is it possible, according to canon law, for our bishop, if he's asked, could give permission for the Blessed Sacrament to be returned to our parish hall or to our church?
Okay, so the parish may not be used as much as it once was. Does canon law require the Blessed Sacrament to be removed?
Yeah, no and yes. It depends on the circumstances, but it's not quite as Sandy would explain. Canon law says that in a parish church, the church itself, once it's consecrated as a parish church is to have the Blessed Sacrament reserved. And where the Blessed Sacrament is reserved, you are to have Mass at least twice a month, and then there's a qualifier, if possible. So if the church was a parish church, belongs to a parish, then according to canon law, the strict wording of the law, the church has a right, if you would, the sacred edifice, to have the Blessed Sacrament within it. Now, we're seeing a big issue with this in a lot of our cases, that the bishops are removing the Blessed Sacrament. They may merge churches and say, or merge parishes and then say, well, this one we're going to make an oratory. Well, they can't do that. They can't relegate a church to oratory status. The law doesn't provide for that. And then they'll say, because you're not a primary parish church, you don't have to have the Blessed Sacrament. But the law doesn't say that. So we are in the middle of a number of appeals with this and trying to get some real jurisprudence from the Vatican on it. But
And Sandy, before the end of the show, we're going to give you a way to contact Philip, at the St. Joseph Foundation and at Cuff, so that you can have some recourse to maybe find out more details that would apply to your circumstance.
right, because when we get these cases in, we do evaluate them on the specifics of their case, and we will go over what the law allows and doesn't allow, and then their chances for success.
Okay.
So,
All right. Let's start off with Paul. Paul, where are you calling from?
I'm calling from the frigid Hudson Valley in New York. How you gentlemen doing?
Well, we're doing better. We were kind of cold, but last night, and it's a little chilly tonight, but it's not what you all are experiencing. That's really cold. Everybody's complaining about putting a wall to stop people from coming from the southern border. But what about the northern border? Stop that wind. Get that cold away from here. But anyway, I digress. What is your question?
My question tonight is, how can the faithful basically put pressure on our religious figureheads, our bishops, our cardinal, to take action against these political leaders that just passed this abortion law in New York State?
Okay, so interesting thing. Now, are you in New York City?
No, I'm in the Hudson Valley. I'm part of the
Okay.
Archdiocese of New York.
Okay, all right. So you're in the Archdiocese of New York. Now, here's the couple things I think we have to deal with. One of the questions is going to be jurisdiction, in terms of who can put the penalties on individual politicians. The Archbishop Cardinal of New York City may not be able to lay that on somebody from another diocese. Would that be correct?
correct. The person either has to have domicile or quasi-domicile in the diocese in question. He could levy a penalty if a crime takes place on a transient who's present, but pretty much the person has to be in the diocese in some fashion. That's the easy answer.
Right, so
But
that it
there's a
would
lot of
be
qualifiers.
the bishop of each place where the offending politicians might be.
Yes,
be-
but oftentimes politicians have more than one house.
Yes.
And if they have a quasi-domicile in one diocese and a domicile in another, the bishop of the quasi-domicile would have some jurisdiction.
Okay, so they just an example would be the Archbishop of Washington, D.C., would have some say for politicians in his city.
Federal politicians, correct.
Right, but there would be it'd be more up to the local bishop from which they come. And this is something that is jurisdiction. What else? What else can they do to get this across to their bishops?
I just finished a position paper about a month ago on the general crisis in the church. And I lay out some practical steps that the faithful can do in order to address some of these issues on a broader scale and even specific scales like this one. First and foremost, they have to pray. And I say that without saying it, but it needs to be said. And they really have to engage a prayer life that's going to help them understand the natural and divine law. The second thing, though, is they've got to organize. One of the problems is that the faithful will often, especially in our social communication era and whatnot, they go at things by themselves because they can send that email, or they can see something on the news and send something in cyberspace, or put up their own website, and they can try to be a lone ranger. And they might even get praise from Twitter feeds or whatever it may be. But they're not organized in a fashion that is recognized in canon law that allows them to take a joint action or to have a joint voice. And that's critical. So if they organize properly, then large numbers of people can be represented by a small group, and their voice has a much louder sound to it.
And you're not asking for peasants with pitchforks to go down to the chancery office.
I am not asking for that. I'm asking for people to use canon law that says that you can appoint someone to represent you as a procurator, if you would, that's the term we use, in order to represent your interests in that matter. We do it with groups as many as 1,000 I've had sign procurator mandates, and then one person with that voice speaks for those 1,000. But if you organize properly, it's just like if people get together and they want to lobby together in civil law or in political climates. The more you have, the stronger the voice. It's no different, but you've got to do it right.
Yeah.
Then you use your organizational structure to influence, and you can do that in a variety of ways. Letter writing that's done respectfully and properly. Canon 212, paragraph 3, makes it crystal clear that the faithful have the right to share their concerns with each other and with the authorities in the church, that they can share their concerns with each other. And we've had cases where people have been told, you can't talk about this, you can't talk about this. Well, this is a natural right by divine law given because of our baptism, that we can share as social creatures our needs with each other that are congruent to each other's needs.
So no person inside the official church can tell the laity, you can't organize against me. No.
Not legitimately. They might say it, but it's not legitimate.
Right. Canon law allows for that. And here's the other thing that I would urge anybody who's thinking about these. Make sure that you keep this completely apart from any kind of partisan politics.
Yes.
This has nothing to do with political parties, any of them.
That's right.
This is about the moral issue of the life of unborn children.
That's right.
And party politics should mean nothing when it comes to this. We don't want to please the politicians. We don't want to kowtow to them or oppose them. That's not our goal. Our goal is promoting the good of humanity.
Now, it's in my opinion, because this is a matter that involves the intrinsic dignity of the human person, doesn't matter if they're Catholic or not either.
That's right.
And so non-Catholics could organize with Catholics under canon law to move and influence the bishops to take action.
Yep. Yeah, and that's some very important points as well.
And I think I've worked with cases where that's happened in different situations, and it is legitimate because it's a natural law issue.
And it's not only about ecumenism with other Christians, it's also about our relationships with Jewish people who hold the same values, Muslims who hold the same values, and atheists who hold the same values. Yes. There are pro-life atheists because the issue has nothing to do with politics, and it's not something that is limited to religion. It's natural law issue about the rights of the innocent to survive. They have a right to life.
Amen.
Yep.
And so with that organization, you've got to take concrete action to influence. Prayer's not good enough. You've got to act on that prayer. Organizing isn't good enough. You've got to act as a body to pursue an end game. And that's where in your influence there's got to be some kind of strategy. And in case to case, situation to situation, we help people develop that.
Yep. Okay. I have a question from our studio audience. What can we possibly do for you today?
You addressed some of it.
Already knows you. Cindy, good to have
Part
you.
of it, you talked about some of this, but I think one of the things that so many people aren't aware of, and that is, what is the best way that a Catholic can take to address an issue or a problem he's having within the church?
Right off the bat, I can say the biggest problem we see is that Catholics don't know that they have rights. So they don't know that there's a canon law that they can use to protect or vindicate their rights. Oftentimes they come to us and it's either too late to act or it's very close to being too late. It's the 11th hour. So let me explain this. Canon law only gives a person 10 days to act in challenge of a decision made by a higher authority. Only 10 days. If you don't act within that 10-day time frame, we have to go back and begin to reconstruct a process in order to create the situation, if you would. So the most important thing is that people cannot wait to decide what to do. When a problem occurs, they need to act quickly. They need to act quickly. Yeah. And unfortunately, many people don't know where to go. Canon lawyers are not easy to find that will take cases on a private basis. And but
again, get your pieces of paper and pencils to take down the information. We'll pass that on to you in just a few minutes, so you know where to go and you can do it in a timely way. Because that's also just to the persons making the decisions.
Yes,
that's important. Let's go, and I think they've got it on the screen too. stjosephcanonlaw.com, so you can take a look at that there on the screen. I have another caller. Barbara, where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Arizona.
Thank you, ma'am. And what is your question?
Okay, I have a 13-year-old grandson that was not baptized when he was a baby. His mother and father are separated and have been for years. His mother was living with another man, but now is not. She's trying to get my grandson baptized. She's been told that he cannot be baptized. Is this true? And if so, how old does he have to be to say himself that he wants to be baptized?
That's a good question. Again, we would want to see the particulars of the case. The law says that if there's a founded hope that the child will be raised in the faith, they are to be baptized. That founded hope doesn't have to come from the parents. It can even come from grandparents,
right.
godparents, close friends. That as long as the parents are in agreement to allow this to happen, and there is a founded hope that the child will be raised in the faith, then the child is to be baptized. Faith is a gift.
Right. So
faith is a gift.
It's would be the situation that if the mother says, I don't ever want him to know a single thing about the Catholic Church, and the father agrees, or the stepfather, and this is something else, then you got a situation that maybe not to baptize. But if there is a chance, and especially if the child, you come in a young man, if he wants to be baptized, presumably he'll have the interior ability to keep on studying and learning the faith.
Yes, 16, if I believe. I don't have my code of canon law out, so I'd want to double check it. But I believe a 16-year-old can present himself for baptism.
Yeah.
Without a doubt, 18, but I'm pretty sure a 16-year-old can present himself for baptism.
Okay. We also have Tom. Tom, where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Medina, Ohio.
My neck of the woods.
All right.
And that is the Diocese of Cleveland.
And your question?
And my question is, we had about 15 churches closed, about 5 of them have reopened. And this was done not by our present bishop, who is a wonderful bishop. Bishop Perez is extremely wonderful. But this was in the Cleveland Diocese. And the churches that were closed were St. Joseph's, Saint.
You have to get to the point of your question because we're running out of time.
Sacrament. And I was wondering what happened to all the artifacts that used to be in the churches that closed. Were they just thrown out? Were they distributed to different churches? Were they even reconsidered for other churches?
Well,
Good question.
It's a great question. I can tell you what's supposed to happen, but I don't know what happened in those situations. What's supposed to happen is that a parish is an incorporation in canon law. We call them juridic persons. When that juridic person becomes extinct, then the parish is merged to another parish. The parish that obtains the obligations, the pastoral obligations of the extinct parish, also obtains the right to all the patrimony, including the property,
the art,
whether it's real property or personal property. So under canon law, what's supposed to happen is that the parish that absorbed the obligations would also obtain the patrimony, and then the pastor, in following the diocesan guidelines, would use it or dispose of it properly. Now, unfortunately, we have seen artifacts thrown away, wrongly sold, or just housed in warehouses.
Sorry, we're running out of time. There's just a minute left. But just want you to know that you can go to St. Joseph Canon Law Society. It's stjosephcanonlaw.com, stjosephcanonlaw.com. Or you can also go to cuff.org for Catholics United for the Faith. Learn more about what the law says and what you can do. Sorry that we're running so much out of time, but you were very, very great with giving all that information. And may the Lord bless all of you and give you his peace, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and pour his blessings upon all those politicians and other folks that need that. All right, thank you very much, and keep us between your gas bill and electric bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat.